My name is Margaret Ellison, and I never thought my own daughter would choose to vanish with a criminal rather than sit at her family's dinner table. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It was just a Sunday dinner. Nothing fancy. I had roasted chicken in the oven, garlic, mashed potatoes on the stove, and green beans the way Hannah liked them, still a little crisp. I'd even made her favorite apple cobbler. My husband Greg was outside tinkering with the shed light, and my son David had just gotten home from work. It was the kind of meal we used to have every week before life got too busy, before the silence started slipping between us like cold drafts in an old house. But this dinner was different. Hannah showed up late. Not her usual 5 or 10 minutes, nearly 45. Her hair was unbrushed, she wore heavy eyeliner that made her look older and angrier, and her phone never left her hand. When I asked if everything was okay, she said fine. When Greg asked how her classes were, she said, "Don't worry about it." When David asked if she'd finally blocked that guy who kept messaging her, she stood up from the table. And then without warning, she said it. "I'm leaving, tonight." The room stilled. Forks hovered midair. I could still hear the tick of the kitchen clock, as if time was the only one who didn't freeze. Leaving where I asked. With who? Greg added, his tone already sharpening. She crossed her arms. With Dean. My stomach dropped before my brain could catch up. Dean, I echoed the name, sticking in my throat like a splinter. Dean Kessler, she said, as if daring us to stop her. Greg stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. "You've lost your damn mind," he barked. David's face twisted. "You mean the guy who's in prison, the one they arrested for robbing 3 gas stations and assaulting a clerk?" Hannah's chin lifted. "He's out soon. And he's not what they say. You all only ever hear one side." I couldn't move. I looked at my daughter, my baby girl, the one I'd braided hair for before kindergarten, who used to curl up next to me watching Little House on the Prairie, and I didn't recognize the woman standing before me. "He understands me," she snapped. "He listens. He doesn't judge." I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "Hannah, he's dangerous. No, you just want me to marry some boring guy from church and stay here forever like you did." Greg slammed his palm on the table. "This is insanity." She took a step back. "I'm going whether you like it or not. I'm not your prisoner." And just like that, she walked out. Not upstairs, not to her room, out the front door. She didn't take anything but her phone and her purse. The front door slammed. Her footsteps faded into the dark. And we sat there, all of us stunned, broken, helpless. David muttered something and stood up, heading after her. But she was already gone. Greg sat down again, his hand covering his face. "This is on you, Margaret," he said through gritted teeth. "You babied her. Always did. That hurt. More than I expected." I didn't respond. I just stared at the apple cobbler on the counter. Still warm. Untouched. Later that night, I crept into her room. I was hoping irrationally that maybe she'd snuck back in, that this was just a tantrum. But the room was empty. Everything looked the same, too normal for what had just happened. Her bed was made. Textbooks scattered on the desk. A dried flower pressed between the pages of her notebook. And then I saw it. A small box tucked behind the curtain rod. One I didn't recognize. I pulled it down, hesitating before opening it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Some yellowed, some still creased as if barely read. All handwritten. All signed. "Yours, Dean." Some were romantic. Others philosophical. One was chillingly detailed about how no one on the outside understands us, and when I get out, it'll be you and me, finally. I sat there on her bed reading until the clock hit midnight. That's when I realized this wasn't sudden. This wasn't impulsive. She'd been planning this. For months, and I hadn't seen it. I was a mother. I used to be a counselor. I helped other kids make good choices. I guided them through addiction, heartbreak, even abuse. But I hadn't seen my own daughter slipping away. How had I missed it? Was it her silence over the past year? The arguments we brushed off? The late nights out, she claimed, were study groups. Had I stopped watching, or had I simply chosen to believe she was still the girl who held my hand crossing parking lots? I spent the rest of the night wide awake on the living room couch waiting for a knock on the door, a phone call, anything. Greg didn't speak to me. David eventually went back to his place. And I just sat with the box on my lap and a pit in my stomach that I feared would never leave. I wasn't just afraid for my daughter. I was terrified of what she might do to prove she didn't need us anymore. Because what could be more dangerous than a young woman trying to prove she's in control by handing her life to a man who's already ruined his own? When I woke up the next morning, or rather, when my eyes opened after hours of restless tossing, my house didn't feel like my own anymore. The kitchen still smelled faintly of apple cobbler, now cold and uneaten. The hallway still held Hannah's shoes by the door, a single sandal crooked on the mat like it had been kicked off in a hurry. Everything looked the same, and yet, I knew nothing ever would be again. I sat alone drinking my coffee, staring out the window. Greg had left early, no note, no word. I suspected he didn't want to face me, or maybe he couldn't face the truth that something in our parenting had failed. I don't remember deciding to go into Hannah's room again, but my feet led me there like they were on autopilot. I needed to know more. I couldn't accept that my daughter had chosen this man, this criminal, without being manipulated somehow. That had to be it. She had to be brainwashed, groomed. I sat on her bed again and went through the letters one by one. That's when I saw it, a single envelope unlike the others. Not handwritten. It had a printed label. The address read, Margaret Ellison, 83 Willow Bend Lane, Sarasota, FL. It was never opened. With trembling fingers, I tore the top carefully. Inside was a short letter typed neatly, signed Dean Kessler. Mrs. Ellison, I know you don't know me yet, but I hope someday you'll understand that I truly love your daughter. I'm not asking for your blessing. I'm just asking for time. Hannah and I have a bond that can't be broken by bars or disapproval. I know what I've done in my past. I'm not proud of it. But I paid for it. I've changed. You can keep fighting us, or you can let her go and trust that love might be what saves me. Dean, I read it 3 times. Then I ripped it in half. This man had dared to address me directly. As if he had the right. As if he had earned the respect to use my name to ask me for trust. Dean Kessler. I remembered him vaguely from the local news 2 years ago. Armed robbery at a gas station 2 towns over. Caught trying to steal a car with a knife in his waistband. He'd injured someone, a clerk. Young man, early 20s. There was surveillance footage of Dean throwing a bottle at the camera. His face, grainy, wild-eyed, had been splashed across TV and social media. And now he wanted me to believe love had transformed him, not a chance. I called David. He picked up after 2 rings. Hey, Mom. You okay? I didn't realize until then how much I needed to hear his voice. No, I said quietly. She left a letter. From him. She's been in contact with him for a long time. David swore under his breath. I'll try to find out if she's still on campus. Maybe she didn't actually drop out. Maybe it's all just some bluff. I don't think so, I said. I found a bus receipt in her drawer. She left town. David was silent. Do you think she's with him? I asked. I think she thinks she's in love with him, he replied. That's the scariest kind of trap. That evening, I called the prison. At first, the woman on the line was cold. We don't give out inmate information to non-family members. He's writing to my daughter, I said. She's 18. I'm still her mother. This man is manipulating her. I need to know if he's even still there. After a long pause and some hold music, she returned with a sigh. Dean Kessler was transferred 6 weeks ago to a re-entry halfway house. He's finishing out his sentence under parole supervision. He's technically out. I gripped the counter for support. Where I can't disclose the address. It's protected, she said. But he's somewhere in state. That's all I can say. So he was out. Walking freely. with access to my daughter. The panic rose in my chest like a tide. What if she'd already found him? What if he'd taken her somewhere I'd never be able to reach? Later that night, I sat in the dark in my bedroom staring at the wall. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even pray. I just thought of all the moments I missed, the signs I brushed off. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hello, nothing at first. Then a breath. Mom. It was her. Hannah. I'm okay, she said quickly, but her voice was strained. I just wanted to let you know. I'm okay. Where are you? Please tell me I can't. Are you with Dean? Pause. Yes. My heart cracked open like a dropped vase. Hannah, please. He's dangerous. You don't know what you're doing. I do know, she snapped, but her voice trembled. You just never listen to me. You all treat me like I'm stupid. Dean respects me. He's using you. No. He believes in me. We're going to start fresh. He has a job lined up. We're staying low until his parole clears. This isn't a movie, Hannah. You're running off with a man who almost killed someone I just called to say, don't come looking for me. The line clicked dead. I stared at the screen long after it went black. She was with him. She sounded scared but determined. The worst kind of mixed fear tied to fantasy. She wasn't ready to be saved. Not yet. But I wasn't done being her mother. The next morning, I started digging. Social media, public records. I wasn't just some worried parent anymore. I was going to find the truth. Because no one, not even a charming criminal with soft words and slick lies, was going to take my daughter from me, not without a fight. The next few days blurred into one long stretch of obsession. I barely slept. I barely ate. Greg and I passed each other like ghosts, saying nothing, pretending not to blame one another, though I could feel his quiet fury press against the walls like humidity. But I couldn't focus on blame anymore. I had one mission: find Hannah. The bus receipt she left behind was the only lead I had. Sarasota to Jacksonville. Departed 2 nights ago. That narrowed things down. I started scrolling through social media accounts focusing on parolee tracking pages, local halfway house mentions re-entry programs. I found a few anonymous boards where ex-cons and their families shared halfway house reviews, names, cities, conditions. I read every post like it was sacred scripture. Then I struck something. A woman in a Jacksonville group mentioned her brother being housed at Marlin House, a small, privately run halfway house on the edge of town. I checked the Florida correction site. Marlin House was listed. I held my breath and typed Dean Kessler. And there it was. Status parole. Placement Marlin House. My hands went cold. So she was there. Somewhere near him. I didn't know if she was living with him. I hoped not. But the thought alone made my stomach turn. I drove up the next morning. 4 hours on the highway alone, white-knuckling the steering wheel, rehearsing every possible conversation. What would I say if I saw her? What would I do if I saw him? I didn't tell Greg I was going. When I reached the address, it looked like a small rundown motel, one of those low-roofed, faded places with rooms arranged in a long L shape. A rusty sign read, Marlin House Transitional Center, with the letters peeling. I parked across the street. I didn't know what I was expecting. A glimpse of Hannah through a window, Dean swaggering out in slow motion like some villain in a bad film. I waited. 3 hours passed. Then I saw her. She walked out of the building wearing a black hoodie, hair tied back messily, holding a fast food bag. She didn't look like my daughter. She looked older, exhausted. Not just physically, but in spirit. She was thinner. She didn't smile. But what crushed me the most was the man beside her. Dean. He had that same face I remembered from the surveillance photo, angular, hollow-eyed, but now he looked cleaned up, shaved, wearing a button-up shirt like he was trying to play a role. His arm was casually slung around her shoulders, and she didn't push it away. I could barely breathe. When she glanced up and saw me, her eyes widened. She dropped the bag. Dean turned, and in that frozen moment my eyes met his. There was no shame in his stare, no guilt, just calculation, like he was sizing me up. Hannah stormed toward me. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I needed to see you, to know you're alive. You called parole." "You stalked me now." I flinched. "You're my daughter. You're suffocating me. I'm protecting you. You don't trust me to make my own decisions." "I don't trust him." Hannah Dean stepped forward then. "Ma'am," he said almost politely, "I think it's best you go." I turned to him, rage simmering. "You think you've won her over, don't you? I didn't win her. She's not a prize. She chose me." "No, you targeted her," I spat. "You found someone young, searching for something, and fed her lies until she mistook danger for love." Hannah pulled on his arm. "Let's go." Before they left, I said the last thing I could think of. "You're going to regret this. When it all falls apart, and it will, don't say I didn't try." I drove home with my vision blurred. My chest ached with something deeper than sadness. It was grief. Not for death, but for loss of a different kind. I had lost my daughter to a man who could spin poison into poetry. And the worst part, she wanted it. That night, I went back into her room one more time. I needed to feel closer to her, even if only through traces. I don't know what made me check under her mattress. Maybe it was instinct or desperation. But there it was. A second box. This one wasn't filled with love letters. It was filled with plans, notes on different cities, bus timetables, budget breakdowns, job listings, a fake ID application, sketches of tattoos she wanted to get, quotes copied from Dean's letters. "The world owes us nothing, so take what you can before it takes you." It wasn't just a romance. It was a blueprint for escape. She had built a whole life around him and removed us entirely. That's when I realized I couldn't pull her back by force. Not yet. But if I could prove what he really was, if I could show her with evidence, then maybe she'd see the truth. So I made a new plan. I would go deeper. I would learn who Dean Kessler really was, not the version he gave my daughter, but the man behind the letters, the mugshots, the manipulation. Because the truth might not set her free, but it just might wake her up. People think that when someone goes missing, you call the police, file a report, wait for sirens. But what do you do when your daughter isn't legally missing when she's 18 and technically free? You don't call the police. You become a detective. That night, I pulled out my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop, Hannah, proof. Then I started digging. Dean Kessler had a record that made my skin crawl. It went far beyond the gas station robbery. He'd been picked up for shoplifting at 17, then possession, then trespassing, then the big one-armed robbery and assault. He was sentenced to 6 years, served 4. But what shocked me most were the patterns. His victims were always vulnerable: older clerks, small stores with no security, low-income neighborhoods. He chose people who couldn't fight back, who wouldn't be believed. He was smart enough to skirt real prison time until that final arrest. The judge called him a manipulator with no regard for consequence. That was the man holding my daughter's hand in a parking lot. I printed everything: his records, court transcripts, news articles. I highlighted key lines. Then I looked for names. There was one that came up repeatedly: Officer Caleb Darnell. He was the arresting officer for Dean's biggest case. I found his name in a local article where he described Dean as charming but dangerous. I emailed him. I didn't expect a reply, but 2 days later I got one. Subject: Re Dean Kessler, Mrs. Ellison. I remember your daughter's name from the visitor logs. If she's with him now, she's in more trouble than she realizes. I've seen girls like her get roped in and used as cover. If you're willing to meet, I can share what I'm allowed to. Officer Darnell. We met at a small cafe just outside the precinct. He was older than I expected. Kind eyes, tired voice. He placed a thick file between us and looked me square in the face. Your daughter isn't the first, and unless someone stops him, she won't be the last. He told me Dean had a pattern he'd befriend women on the outside during his sentences, women from vulnerable homes, girls with fractured families. He used charm, flattery, sympathy, promised change, redemption, a clean future. And every time Darnell said he ended up dragging them into something, drugs, thefts, even prostitution, they always believed they were the exception, that they were going to be the one who saved him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I can't arrest him for sweet-talking someone, he added. But if she's helping him commit parole violations, if she's being used as a shield, we might get involved. I hesitated. What if she doesn't want help? He paused. Then she's got to see the truth herself. But we can't make her look if she's still dreaming. Back home, I organized all the evidence into a binder. Part of me wanted to drive straight to Jacksonville and throw it at her feet, but something held me back. I had already tried confrontation. It didn't work. This time, I had to be patient. I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I wrote her a letter. Dear Hannah, I'm not writing to beg. I'm not writing to scold. I'm writing because you're still my daughter, and that means I'll never stop fighting for you. I know you think Dean loves you. I know it feels like no one else ever understood you like he does. But feelings can lie. And love, real love, doesn't ask you to cut off the people who raised you. I've gathered everything. His past, his victims, his patterns. I'm not mailing this to convince you. I'm sending it so that when the moment comes, when the illusion starts to crack, you'll have something to fall back on. No matter what, I'm still your mother. And I'll still be here when you finally come home. I sealed it. Sent it to the last place I knew she'd check, a mutual friend's apartment. Someone she hadn't burned bridges with. Someone she still trusted. All I could do now was wait. But things didn't stay still for long. 3 days after I sent the letter, I got a call. Unknown number. Mrs. Ellison, a male voice said. Yes. This is Detective Ray Vargas. I'm calling from Jacksonville PD. Are you the mother of Hannah Ellison? My stomach dropped. Yes. Is she? She's not hurt. But we need to talk. Your daughter was involved in an incident. We've detained her for questioning. I sank into a chair. What happened? She was spotted leaving a pawn shop tied to stolen goods. We suspect she was used as a drop-off. The clerk said she seemed nervous, gave a false name. Security footage confirms it's her. Was Dean with her? Not at the time, but we're pretty sure he orchestrated it. My breath caught. She's not under arrest yet, he added. But if she doesn't cooperate, she could be. Greg was silent when I told him. Just sat on the couch staring at the floor. Do you still think I babied her? I asked. He didn't answer. I think I said quietly we both left her vulnerable in different ways. You wanted her tough. I wanted her safe. Neither of us made her feel seen. He rubbed his face with his hands. What the hell do we do now? I looked at the binder of evidence on the kitchen table. We let the truth do what love couldn't. I called the detective back. If I give you everything I've found, letters, records, patterns, can it help her? He paused. If she flips on him, yes. She won't flip yet, I said. But one day she might. I'll take it, he replied. And I'll keep her name in the clear for now. But she's running out of second chances. So was he. Dean had pushed her to the edge, and I was going to be the hand waiting to pull her back. I didn't sleep the night after that call. I stared at the ceiling in the quiet of our house, thinking about the moment I saw her drop the fast food bag when she recognized me. That little reflex, it wasn't anger, it was fear. And buried underneath it was guilt. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but she didn't know how to stop. So I decided to do something I never imagined I'd do. I went to see him. Marlin House didn't allow random visitors, but with some careful wording and the right paperwork, I managed to secure a supervised meeting. I said I was an impacted family member seeking closure. I wore gray slacks and my old work blazer not to impress him, but to remind myself who I was. I wasn't just mom. I was a woman who spent 30 years helping teens avoid lives like his. I knew predators when I saw them, and I wasn't walking into that place weak. When they brought Dean Kessler into the visitation room, I saw immediately why Hannah had fallen. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like someone's washed-up college boyfriend, slightly overgrown hair, sunken cheeks, a faint scar on his chin. He smiled like he was the hero of the story. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, sitting across from me as if this were a friendly lunch. "I was hoping we'd meet." I stared at him for a full 10 seconds before replying. "Cut the charm. I didn't come here to listen to poetry." He laughed. "Then you already misunderstand me?" "No. I understand you perfectly. You find vulnerable women, tell them what they want to hear, and strip them of everyone who could protect them. That's a heavy accusation." I leaned in. "You're not in love with my daughter. You're in love with control. She's a chapter in your manipulation journal, nothing more." His smile faded just slightly, the edge of irritation beginning to show. "Look," he said, voice softening. "Hannah's an adult. She makes her own choices. You treating her like a kidnapped victim only drives her deeper into what you're afraid of. She is a kidnapped victim. You just didn't use ropes." He folded his hands, voice turning cold. "If you're here to threaten me, I'm not here to threaten. I'm here to warn." I placed a manila folder on the table and slid it toward him. Inside was everything: arrest records, testimonies, victim impact statements. "I've turned this into the police, and I've written to her with every detail. I've talked to your parole officer. I know what you're not allowed to do." He didn't touch the folder. "She may still be blind right now," I continued, "but I won't be. And the moment you pull her into another crime, she'll go down with you. But you will go down alone first." His jaw clenched. "You're not her savior." "No," I said, "but I am her mother, and I'm not going away." We sat in silence. Then he leaned back, giving me a smirk that had lost all its charm. "You think this makes a difference? She already chose. Then you should be afraid of the moment she unchooses." I stood, smoothed my jacket, and walked out. On the drive home, my hands were shaking. I hadn't known if I could do it. Sit across from him, hear his voice, look into the eyes of the man who turned my daughter against everything she was raised to be. But I did. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control again. Back at home, Greg was in the garage sorting through old paint cans. We hadn't talked much in the past few days, but when I stepped into the garage, he looked up. "How'd it go?" I didn't answer right away. I sat on the workbench, folded my hands, and said, "He's worse than I thought. He thinks he's invincible." Greg sighed. "That's what makes him dangerous. I told him I'd bury him if he dragged her down." Greg gave me a strange look, then nodded. "Good." And for once we sat together in the same silence, not as enemies, but as parents. The next day I received a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. "Hi, Mrs. Ellison. My name's Carla. I used to know Dean. From before. I heard about what's happening, and I think I can help." My fingers froze. I called her back immediately. Carla was in her late 20s, soft-spoken. She sounded like someone who had been hurt but was trying to reclaim something. "I was with him for almost a year," she said. "He told me I saved him, that I was special. I thought I was the only one." She had heard about Dean being seen with a young girl, Hannah, through a friend who still lived near the halfway house. "That girl," she said quietly, "looks like me 4 years ago." I asked her if she'd be willing to talk to a detective. There was a pause. Then she said yes. The next morning, I passed her name to Officer Darnell and Detective Vargas. "This could help," Darnell said. If we get a pattern on record, it adds pressure. We might even find a reason to revoke his parole. And if that happens, I asked. Then he goes back inside, he said. And your daughter gets a second chance. That night, I wrote another letter to Hannah. You can hate me for interfering. You can accuse me of ruining your life. But I'd rather have your hatred and you alive than your silence and your name on a police report. Please read what I sent you. One day when the storm clears, I hope you'll understand that everything I'm doing isn't to control you. It's to give you back the parts of yourself that he's trying to erase. I didn't send it yet. I held on to it. Because something told me. She wasn't gone for good. Not yet. It was a Tuesday when everything began to unravel. The day started like any other overcast skies, the soft groan of the air conditioner kicking on, and me staring at the kitchen table where I had neatly stacked the police records letters and Hannah's scribbled notes from the box. I had grown used to the tension, the way it clung to the corners of the house, the way Greg avoided eye contact. We were two ghosts living in parallel silence. But at 3:07 p.m. my phone rang. Blocked number. I didn't hesitate. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then Hannah's voice barely audible. Mom, I need help. I sat upright, heart racing. Hannah. Where are you? I can't talk long, she said quickly. He's gone out for a bit. But I messed up. My hand gripped the edge of the table. What happened? I did something stupid. He told me it was just a quick errand, that it wouldn't get us in trouble. But now someone's threatening to report me. I kept my voice steady. Where are you? I'm in Tallahassee. We moved out of Jacksonville last week. He didn't want to stay near the parole center. He said they were watching him. Of course they were. He was on parole. What did you do, Hannah? I pawned a ring, she whispered. He gave it to me, said it was his aunt's. But it turns out it was stolen. The clerk recognized it, said he's giving me a day to come clean or he's calling the police. My stomach dropped. Honey, listen to me. That clerk will report it. And if you're caught with stolen property, it's a felony. I didn't know I believe you. But the law won't care. You're with a convicted felon. You lied about your name. You're not going to be treated gently. She went silent. Does he know? No. He said he'd take care of it. But I'm scared, Mom. He's been different lately. Paranoid. Controlling. Yesterday he took my phone. Where did you get this one? A friend at the shelter. I borrowed hers while she's in the shower. I blinked. Shelter. She hesitated. He said we shouldn't spend money on hotels anymore. That it was safer if we moved around. I didn't want to. But I didn't have a choice. That was it. That was the crack in her voice I'd been waiting for. The guilt. The fear. The beginning of doubt. Listen to me very carefully, I said, standing from the kitchen chair as if it would help her hear me better. You do have a choice. Right now. Right this minute. She didn't reply. You can leave, I continued. You can walk out of that building, head for the bus station, and I will be there. No questions. No lectures. Just me. Just your mom. Her voice trembled. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can. You just did the hardest thing by calling me. Another pause. Then I'm scared he'll find me. I closed my eyes. Then let me protect you. We arranged a time. I booked a ticket, packed a bag, and called Officer Darnell. I told him where she was. He said he'd notify Tallahassee PD to be on alert in case Dean showed up. Greg insisted on coming. For the first time since this nightmare started, he said, She's still our girl. We drove through the night headlights cutting through the misty Florida dark. The shelter was run down. A faded sign. Fluorescent lights flickering inside. She was standing by the edge of the building, arms crossed, hoodie up, eyes darting nervously down the street. When she saw us, she didn't run. She broke. She fell into my arms, sobbing so hard I thought her lungs would give out. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so, so sorry. I've got you, I said, holding her tighter than I ever had in my life. You're safe now. Greg put his hand on her shoulder. He didn't say much, but his voice cracked when he said, "Come home." We took her to a motel 2 towns over just to stay off Dean's radar. That night we sat in silence on the 2 queen beds. Then she said, "He wasn't always like that, Mom. At first, he was sweet. He said I was the only person who ever really saw him." "That's how men like him work," I said gently. "They find good hearts, then twist them." She nodded. I thought I could save him. I reached for her hand. "Now it's time to save yourself." In the morning, she agreed to speak to the police. She confessed everything: the pond ring, the alias, the motel stays, the bus routes. She gave them Dean's current location and even agreed to testify about his parole violations. It was risky, but it was the first real step back toward her life. 2 days later, Dean Kessler was arrested again. Violation of parole, possession of stolen goods, probable coercion of a witness. He didn't go quietly, but he went. When I got the call from Officer Darnell, he said, "You might have just saved your daughter's life." I replied, "She saved her own. I just gave her the chance." Back home, Hannah moved back in. It wasn't easy. She was quiet, skittish, often startled by noises. At night, I sometimes heard her crying in the bathroom with the water running, but she was here, and she was trying. That was more than I'd dared to hope. One night, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through the manila folder of evidence I had once prepared. She looked up at me, teary-eyed. "You were right," she said. I shook my head. "I didn't want to be." She reached out and took my hand. "I didn't believe you because I didn't believe I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving," I said. "You just forgot for a while." The days that followed felt like walking through a field of broken glass barefoot. Hannah was home, but home didn't feel like the word it used to. We were relearning everything: how to speak to each other without tension, how to exist in the same space without guilt. Even the way she stirred sugar into her coffee seemed more guarded, as if waiting for the next shoe to drop. I didn't push her, but I watched. She slept with her door locked. She flinched whenever the doorbell rang, and she never went anywhere alone. Greg returned to his routine slowly. He mowed the lawn, fixed the screen door, read the paper without comment. But at night, I caught him sitting by her bedroom door more than once, pretending he'd just been passing by. Our house wasn't healed, but it was breathing again. And then, just as we started to feel the smallest hint of normal, the phone rang. This time, it was Detective Vargas. "Hannah's cooperation led us to something bigger," he said. "We raided a storage unit Dean was using in Tallahassee. Found stolen merchandise, burner phones, and names of at least 3 other young women." I swallowed hard. He continued, "There's a chance he'll be tried on additional federal charges, but we need your daughter's help again. More testimony. More clarity." I looked over at Hannah, curled up on the couch in my old hoodie, staring blankly at a muted TV. "I'll talk to her," I said. "But you'll need to be patient. She's been through hell. We know. And if it helps her long term, we're willing to make it worth her while. She could be granted victim protections. Maybe even have the earlier charges dropped entirely. Victim protections. It made sense, but saying it out loud still hurt. That night, I sat beside her on the couch. "Honey," I said. Detective Vargas called. Her shoulders tensed. "What now?" "They found more. More girls, more evidence. They need your help again." She hugged her knees. "I thought it was over." "I know, but this could close the door completely. Not just for you, for others like you." She didn't reply right away. Then she asked, "If I go on record, will people think I was weak?" I shook my head. "No. They'll think you were brave. That you escaped something people don't always come back from." She looked down at her hands. I still dream about him sometimes. Not the bad stuff, just his voice when he told me I was special. I squeezed her hand. That's the part that's hardest to heal. When your heart mourns the lie, even when your mind knows the truth. A week later, we drove her to the courthouse. She wore a black dress, minimal makeup. She looked older than her age, not in appearance, but in something behind her eyes, a shadow that hadn't been there before. She testified in a closed session. The judge ordered her identity protected. Dean didn't look at her once, but I did. She never looked away. Afterward, she cried in the car for almost 20 minutes. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears like she was releasing every piece of shame she'd been carrying in silence. I feel like I just buried someone, she whispered. You did, I said gently. You buried the version of yourself he tried to create. The news came a month later. Dean's parole was revoked. He was facing new charges, including coercion, possession of stolen goods, and parole fraud. He would serve another 6 years minimum. But by then, Hannah had already begun her quiet rebuild. She signed up for an online course in trauma psychology. She joined a support group under a different name. She started volunteering twice a week at a women's shelter. At first, I worried she was diving into others' pain to avoid her own. But one night she said something I'll never forget. If I can make just one girl realize she doesn't need to stay quiet, then I'll know I didn't live through this for nothing. That summer, she painted her room. The bright purple walls she once begged for as a teenager were gone, replaced with a soft, calming sage green. I need something that feels like who I am now, she said. I watched her hold the brush with steady hands. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. One night in early fall, she brought home a small framed quote. It read, "Sometimes the person you need to rescue is the one you've become." She hung it by her bedside, and as I stood in her doorway watching her tuck herself in, I realized something. My daughter wasn't broken. She was remaking herself. And this time, no one else held the brush. It's strange how silence can feel louder than noise. After Dean was arrested again, there was a brief stillness in our home, like we were all holding our breath, waiting to see what kind of damage would rise to the surface. Hannah was back under our roof, safe by every external standard, but emotionally, she was still walking barefoot across invisible glass. She didn't cry much. She didn't rage or scream or curl into my lap the way she did as a child when she skinned her knee. No. Hannah had become something else, entirely muted and watchful, like she was bracing herself for the next hit. The bruises weren't on her skin. They were in her voice, in her careful footsteps, in the way she folded her clothes with almost obsessive precision. She would make her bed 3 times a day. She'd open drawers, close them, then check again just to make sure they were still shut. When I asked if she wanted to talk, she'd shake her head gently and say, "Not yet." I didn't push her, but I stayed close. And when she couldn't sleep, when I heard her pacing in her room or sitting in the hallway at 3 a.m., I'd get up too. I'd boil water and make tea, and we'd sit at the table without saying much. She'd cradle the mug like it was a small fire. That was the most I could offer her, then quiet presence. The reassurance that I wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't long before the first reminder that Dean's grip wasn't completely gone arrived. I was folding towels in the laundry room when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar and I let it go to voicemail. But something in my chest tightened when I saw the transcription pop up. "You think you've won?" I stood still for a full minute, towel clenched in my hands. Then I hit play. Dean's voice was unmistakable, calm, controlled. Like he was still playing some chess game in his mind and thought this was just another move. "You think turning her against me makes you strong, but she'll come back. They always do. And when she does, don't say I didn't try to warn you." Click. I saved the message immediately and forwarded it to Detective Vargas. Within 2 hours, he called me. He must have smuggled a phone inside. "We're tracking it now. He won't be able to contact anyone again, Mrs. Ellison, but I need to ask. Do you want to press charges for harassment? I stared out the kitchen window. Hannah was sitting on the back porch, hugging her knees, lost in her own thoughts. She looked peaceful for the first time in days. No, I said. Not yet. But I want that message on record. If anything else comes through, let us know immediately. I thanked him, then deleted the voicemail from my phone but saved it to a secure drive. I didn't tell Hannah. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because that message wasn't about her. It was about him. And I refused to give Dean the satisfaction of poisoning her recovery with more fear. The real turning point came the day she asked if we could visit the storage unit where she'd kept her things. We drove together in near silence, only the hum of the engine and the occasional click of her fingernail tapping against the window. The facility was modest rows of metal doors under a wide gray sky. She had a small unit in the back corner. The moment she unlocked it, a musty wave of air hit a stale perfume, old fabric, and something faintly chemical. The floor was dusty and cobwebs clung to the corners, but it was neatly arranged. Almost obsessively so. There were 2 boxes marked books, one labeled clothes, and a duffel bag I remembered from when she was 16. It was the same bag she used for overnight field trips and her first visit to summer camp. I wanted to cry. Hannah knelt down and unzipped it. Out came a cracked, compact mirror, a makeup bag, a hairbrush with several strands still knotted into the bristles, a torn flannel shirt that clearly wasn't hers, and then a small velvet pouch. She opened it and pulled out a necklace, silver, delicate, a fake gemstone set in a cheap-looking setting. He told me it was real, she said. Her voice was flat. Said it was his mother's, that it was all he had left of her. I took it gently from her hands and turned it over. There was no hallmark, no weight. The chain was already tarnishing. It's costume jewelry, I said softly. She nodded. I figured. And then, without ceremony, she stood and tossed it into a black trash bag she'd brought. No tears, no speeches, just the sound of something false landing with a dull thud at the bottom of a garbage sack. On the drive home, she spoke more than she had in weeks. I used to tell myself we were Bonnie and Clyde, she said, staring out the passenger window. 2 people against the world. But I think I confused chaos for passion. I didn't interrupt. I thought I was being brave. That loving someone broken made me powerful. But he didn't want healing. He wanted control. She looked down at her hands, and I let him have it. I reached over and placed my hand gently over hers. No, he took it. That's the difference. She didn't cry, but she squeezed my hand. That night, she brought me something. It was a worn leather journal, the kind I used to give her for birthdays when she was little. She placed it on the kitchen table beside my cup of tea and said, "I've started writing again." I blinked. "You have?" She nodded. "Letters. To the girl I used to be, and the woman I want to become." I asked if I could read one someday. She smiled. Tonight. When she went to bed, I opened the journal. The page was dated only a few days ago. Dear Hannah, you thought strength was silence. You thought bruises meant bravery. You thought love required vanishing. But you were wrong. You didn't need to disappear. You didn't need to burn your bridges to feel free. And you didn't have to lose everyone who loved you just to find yourself. But I forgive you. Because you were doing the best you could with the lies you'd been told. And now, you're finally starting to tell yourself the truth. I closed the journal, slowly pressed it to my chest, and let the tears come. Not of sadness, but of something else. Relief. Hope. The first fragile glimpse of a future. A few days later, she told me she wanted to change her number. I don't want any open doors, she said. Not even ones I pretend I'll never walk through. We changed her number. She deleted every contact that didn't feel safe. Started fresh. She also asked for help applying to an internship program in Tampa for a trauma support group that works with women escaping abusive relationships. I asked her if she was sure. She said, "I think it's time I stop running from what happened and start helping someone else run out of it." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed her. Not because she was perfect, but because she was honest. The day Hannah left for Tampa, she packed lightly. Just one duffel bag, a laptop, her journal, and a worn denim jacket I hadn't seen since high school. She stood by the door longer than I expected. Not with fear, with hesitation. The kind that comes when you're standing at the edge of something real, something yours. "Do you think I'm ready?" she asked. I wanted to say yes, to reassure her, to give her the motherly speech about strength and growth and how proud I was. But I also didn't want to lie. So instead I said, "I think you'll figure it out." And I think the figuring out part is where the healing really happens. She gave me a long, unreadable look. Then, for the first time in what felt like years, she stepped forward and hugged me, not the guarded, stiff kind she used to give out of politeness, but a full, sinking breath on my shoulder kind of hug. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. "I never even considered it." We dropped her at the bus station, and as the Greyhound pulled away, I watched the blur of her through the window back, straight face forward. Greg stood beside me, hands in his pockets. "She's going to be all right," he said. I nodded, but my throat was tight. "I know. I just... I hate that she had to learn it the way she did." He looked at me, eyes soft. Sometimes the fire teaches better than the furnace. It was the first metaphor he'd used in months. Maybe he was healing too. A week later, she called. "Tampa's different," she said. "Quiet, but good." She told me about the trauma center, how the walls were painted in calming colors, how the counselors never used the word victim unless someone used it first. She'd been shadowing a group coordinator named Elise, a former abuse survivor who now taught self-defense to women rebuilding their lives. "She doesn't talk about what happened to her much," Hannah said, "but she carries it. You can feel it. Not like a wound, like a scar that made her stronger." I asked if it felt triggering. She paused. "Sometimes, but in a good way. It makes me want to move forward, not backward." She started attending peer-led meetings, at first just as an observer, but eventually Elise encouraged her to speak. And one night Hannah told her story. She later told me she didn't cry when she shared it. She just kept her eyes on the floor and let the words fall out. "I thought I was saving him," she had said. But really, I was trying to prove I was worthy of being chosen. When she looked up, 3 other women were crying. One of them came up afterward and hugged her. "I thought I was the only one who got lost like that," the woman said. "You weren't," Hannah replied. Back home, I still had nightmares. Not of Dean himself, but of losing Hannah again, waking up to an empty room, her shoes missing from the porch. But every time she called, the tension in my chest loosened a little more. She talked about wanting to go back to school, maybe psychology, maybe social work. "I don't want to be a therapist," she said, "but I want to be something for someone else." I told her that sounded just right. Then one evening she called and asked, "Do you still have that voicemail?" My heart stilled. Dean's... Yeah. I hesitated. Why, I think I need to hear it again, to remind myself. "Hannah, that man's voice is poison. You don't need to. I won't let it break me. I want to hear how far I've come." I emailed her the file. She didn't call afterward. But 2 days later, I received a package. It was a small frame. Inside, printed on thick paper, was a typed quote, "You think you've won. Dean Kessler." Response: "Yes, I did. Hannah Ellison." She had signed the bottom in blue ink. I hung it in the hallway where her baby pictures used to be. It wasn't pretty, but it was powerful. In Tampa, Hannah's counselor encouraged her to start writing a blog for young women who had experienced emotional manipulation. She didn't name Dean. She didn't even name herself at first. She wrote anonymously under the pseudonym Blue Door. In her first post, she wrote, When you walk through the wrong door long enough, you forget there are others. But the moment you open even one, just a crack, the world can start again. Her posts gained traction. Comments started coming in. Women from all over the country sharing pieces of themselves. She told me reading those replies was like stitching herself back together with thread made from other people's courage. Then came the interview request. A local podcast about survivor stories wanted to feature her. I don't know if I'm ready, she told me. You don't have to be perfect, I said. Just honest. She did it. Nervous but steady. She shared her story in her real name, her real voice. After it aired, she got dozens of messages. Some from strangers, some from people she hadn't spoken to in years. One stood out. I remember you from high school. I used to think you were so confident. I had no idea you were going through that. Thank you for being brave enough to speak. She called me afterward. I think I've finally forgiven myself, she said. And I cried, because that was the part I could never do for her. That Thanksgiving she came home. Not just physically, but fully. She walked through the front door with a calm I had never seen in her before. She hugged Greg longer than usual. She sat with me on the porch swing that night, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea, just like we used to. And when I asked her what she was most thankful for, she said, my second chance. Then she looked at me and added, and for the woman who didn't give up on me even when I did. I didn't respond. I just took her hand. Because no words were big enough for that moment. She had found her way back. Not to who she was, but to who she was meant to become. And I had the privilege of watching her step into that truth. One brave, beautiful footstep at a time. Winter passed more gently that year. Not because the weather changed. Florida winters are mild, always have been, but because for the first time in what felt like a decade, I didn't feel like I was living under a storm cloud. Hannah was still in Tampa, but she called every Sunday without fail. Sometimes just to talk about nothing in particular. The new grocery store she liked, a podcast she found interesting, a stray cat that kept visiting her apartment. Sometimes she said almost nothing at all, but I could hear the calm in her voice. She had started seeing a therapist again this time, not out of crisis, but because she wanted to. That small shift, wanting healing instead of being forced into it, was everything. In March, she came home for a weekend visit. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she had changed drastically, but because something subtle had shifted in the way she carried herself. She wasn't bracing anymore. She stood tall, eyes steady, like someone who had finally stopped apologizing for surviving. "Hey, Mom," she said. I smiled, pulled her in, and whispered, "Welcome home." That evening, we sat in the kitchen sipping coffee like old times. She looked around the room slowly, taking in the familiar details. The same chipped mug I always used. The little curtain I'd sewn for the window. The old fridge magnet that said, "Grace is not given because you're good, it's given because you're loved." "I miss this," she said. "You can come back any time," I replied. She hesitated. Then she pulled something out of her purse and slid it across the table. A manila envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside were printed documents, court records, news articles, and a letter on official letterhead. It was from the prosecutor's office. Dean Kessler had been formally sentenced 11 years in federal prison. No parole. Multiple charges stacked: coercion, interstate transport of stolen property, parole fraud, and obstruction of justice. I stared at the paper, blinking slowly. I hadn't expected the news to hit me this way. "I thought you should know," she said quietly. "I didn't want you to find out through the news. Thank you." I folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. And then I said the words that had been forming for months. "I'm proud of you." She looked down as if unsure whether to believe me. "You went through something most people wouldn't survive," I continued. "And instead of burying it, you turned it into something that helps others. You didn't just heal. You gave that healing away." She sniffed eyes glassy. I still think about it sometimes, she admitted. How I got there. What made me ignore the warning signs. The way I didn't want to hear your voice when your voice was the only one that ever told me the truth. I reached across the table and took her hand. You were looking for something. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. She squeezed my fingers. That night we went through a box of old photo albums. She laughed at pictures of her in pigtails and glitter boots. Greg even came into the living room and joined us, pulling out a few embarrassing baby stories. We were a family again. Not perfect. Not pretending nothing had happened. But real. Honest. Fragile and yet somehow stronger than we'd ever been. At one point, she held up a photo of her at 15 grinning with braces and holding a birthday cake. Do you think she'd recognize me now? She asked. I looked at the photo, then at her. No, but I think she'd be proud. The next morning, she asked if we could visit Grandma's grave. It was unexpected. My mother had passed just before Hannah met Dean. They had been close in their own way. My mother was tough, blunt, and opinionated, but she adored Hannah. She always said, that girl has fire in her blood. Just don't let the wrong person fan it. We brought fresh flowers, white lilies, and stood quietly at the headstone. I didn't come after she died, Hannah said softly. I told myself it was because I was busy. But it wasn't. I know. She knelt down and placed the flowers gently at the base of the stone. I think she would have hated Dean, she whispered. I smiled faintly. She would have set him on fire with just a stare. Hannah chuckled. She never did like people who lied. No. And she had a way of seeing through them. She stood brushing dirt from her jeans. Maybe I've got some of that in me after all. You always did. Back at home, we cooked dinner together for the first time in years. It was simple roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, a mirror of the meal that once shattered our family to pieces. But this time, there was no tension, no anger, just laughter and the quiet rhythm of chopping, stirring, and setting the table. I watched her move around the kitchen, confident now, unafraid. She wasn't that wide-eyed girl chasing danger anymore. She was becoming a woman who had survived it. I want to start over, she said suddenly. I turned. What do you mean I want to change my last name? I blinked. Why? Because Kessler's not the only name I gave away. I gave away myself. And I want to take it back on my terms. I set down the spoon and walked over. Whatever name you choose, I'll be proud to say it. She smiled, then paused. Actually, I think I'll keep Ellison. But not because I want to go backward, because I want to carry forward the part of me that survived. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and she had gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, flipping through the photos we hadn't finished. There was one picture that caught my eye, her at age 10, standing on stage at a school play, dressed like a knight. Sword in hand, shield slung across her chest, fierce and proud. I remembered that day. She had insisted on being the knight instead of the princess. Why, I'd asked. Because the knight does the saving, she said. And maybe she had been right all along. Because that's what she did. She saved herself. The spring after Hannah changed her number and reclaimed her name. Something in our lives shifted again, but this time it was quieter. No arrests, no screaming, no dramatic exits or emergency calls in the middle of the night. It was a change rooted in silence, in rebuilding. Greg had started mowing the lawn more regularly. I caught him humming again, not words, just small melodies. He'd begun reading in the evenings, and not just the newspaper, but books, novels, even one on healing family estrangement that I didn't mention, but silently appreciated. As for me, I returned to my garden, the one I had neglected for nearly a year. The soil had hardened, the roses had withered, and weeds had claimed corners that once held order. It was almost poetic, really, this garden that mirrored my heart. but I began turning the soil again day by day, reclaiming it. That's what healing looked like in real life. Not epiphanies, but chores. Then one day, Hannah called me from Tampa, her voice filled with a nervous excitement. "Mom, I applied to something," she said. "It's kind of crazy." "What is it?" "There's a national grant program for survivor-led initiatives, people who've experienced trauma and are now creating resources to support others." I sent in my blog, the podcast interview, some of my writing. "That's incredible," I said. "When do you hear back next month? And what happens if you get it?" She hesitated, then laughed nervously. "They give you funding and mentorship to start your own program. I'd have to move to DC." My heart fluttered. "Oh, I know she rushed it's far, and I don't even know if I'll get it. It felt like something I had to try for." "You should," I said, even though my stomach twisted at the thought of her being so far away again. "This time, you're running toward something." She was silent for a moment. "I am, aren't I?" That evening, I told Greg about the grant. He nodded. "Good for her. She's earned it." I waited. Then I asked, "Do you think we were too hard on her, or maybe too soft? Or both?" Greg leaned back in his chair. "I think we raised a girl the best we could. And when she lost her way, we did what mattered more. We stayed when she came back." I reached across the table and took his hand. I still think about that night. The dinner. When she said she was leaving with him. "Me too," he said. But I remember something else more. What that moment at the bus station, when she turned around and smiled before stepping onto the Greyhound. That smile was real. It was the first one in years. Weeks passed. She didn't talk much about the grant, but I could hear it behind her words. The hope, the fear, the self-doubt trying to crawl back in. She started ending her phone calls with, "I love you." And not the rushed kind. The real kind. That more than anything let me know she was growing. One Saturday morning in early May, I got the call. "Mom," she said, breathless. "I got it." For a moment, I forgot how to speak. You did. They picked me. Out of over 200 applicants, I'm going to DC. There it was. The joy, the terror, all at once. I sank into the nearest chair. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. She laughed, but it cracked with emotion. "I didn't think I could do this. I still don't know if I can. You can. You already have." We spent the next 2 weeks preparing. She came home for a weekend to pack up the last of her things. We bought luggage, labeled folders, made checklists, but we also took moments just to be together. We had breakfast on the porch, watched reruns of old shows, went through baby photos. One night she found a letter I had written to her, but never sent, the one from back when she was still with Dean, the one I had tucked away in my drawer. She read it in silence. Then she looked up, tears in her eyes. "I never said thank you for all of this." "You don't have to," I said. "You lived it. You changed. That's thanks enough." Her flight was early, too early, the kind of morning that still looks like night. Greg and I stood with her at the gate saying goodbye. She was dressed in a neat blazer, hair pinned back, rolling a small carry-on beside her. "I don't know what happens next," she said, her voice tight. I smiled. That's what makes it exciting. Then Greg did something I hadn't seen him do in years. He hugged her. Tightly. "You make us proud, Peanut," he said, using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard since she was 12. She broke into a watery laugh and hugged him harder. "I love you, Dad. I love you more." We watched her walk down the jet bridge. She turned once and waved. And then, she was gone. But this time, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like flight. Back home, the house was quieter than usual. I went into her room. The bed was made. The closet was empty. But on the desk, she had left something for me. A framed picture of the two of us taken years ago, before everything, taped with a small note on the back. "I may have gotten lost, but you never stopped lighting the way." I sat on her bed and let myself cry, not for what we lost, but for everything we earned back. Later that evening, I called her. She was already settled into the temporary housing the program had provided. I forgot to ask, I said. What's the name of your project? She paused, then said, It's called The Second Door. The Second Door. Yeah, she said. Because the first door I chose nearly destroyed me, but the second one, it led me home. And then forward. I closed my eyes, holding the phone to my ear. That's beautiful, I whispered. She laughed. I thought so too. And just like that, my daughter, who once disappeared into the arms of a criminal, was now helping others find their own way out. She had walked through the fire and emerged not just alive, but reborn. You always think the story ends when the worst is over. The arrest, the healing, the goodbye. But life doesn't work that way, especially not for mothers. The end of the storm doesn't mean you don't still step outside and feel the damage. It just means you're the one who starts sweeping. And so in the months that followed Hannah's move to DC, I found myself adjusting to a new rhythm, one where silence didn't feel like danger anymore, and distance wasn't a threat, but a sign of her becoming. Still, every Sunday morning, like clockwork, my phone would buzz. Hannah, video call incoming. Her smile would fill the screen, her backdrop changing each time, sometimes her temporary office space, sometimes a crowded cafe, sometimes a park bench where she liked to read. Hey Mom, she'd say. You have time, I always did. One Sunday, she called me from outside a conference center. Behind her, women were gathered in small clusters, clutching coffee cups and name tags. I just gave my first keynote, she said, visibly shaking. To actual people, not just survivors, professionals, therapists, donors. I gasped. How did it go? She laughed. I think I blacked out halfway through. But Elise said I sounded like I'd been doing it for years. Elise. My mentor here. She's incredible. Runs a reintegration nonprofit for women leaving prison. I saw the pride in her eyes, even if she tried to downplay it. I wish Grandma could see you, I said. Hannah grew quiet. I think about her a lot. I wear her old earrings when I speak. Kind of like armor. Then she's with you, I said. She nodded, and for a moment she was the little girl again, the one who used to dance in the living room wearing fairy wings and rain boots. Only now she was leading a room full of people towards something better. Meanwhile, back at home, something unexpected happened. I was invited to speak at a local high school, my old workplace, about supporting families through trauma. At first, I said no. What did I know about speaking in public? I wasn't the survivor. I was just the mother. But then I thought about all the parents who had sat where I once sat, helpless, confused, heartbroken, and I realized I had something to offer. Not expertise, but experience. So I said yes. The night before the talk, I sat at the kitchen table drafting my notes. I tried to list the advice I wish someone had given me. Not grand lessons, just small truths. Trust your instincts even when your child hates you for it. Silence doesn't mean they're safe. Love doesn't always look like agreement. Stay, even when they push you away. Especially when they push you away. I printed it all out, double-spaced, and paper-clipped the pages. Greg saw them on the table the next morning. Is that your speech? He asked. I nodded. Can I come? That surprised me, but I smiled. Of course. The classroom was smaller than I remembered, but the energy in the room was electric. A few parents, a few students, some teachers who still remembered me. I stood at the front, hands trembling slightly, and said, My daughter once chose a man who nearly destroyed her, but she came back. And I want to tell you what it looks like, not the fall, but the return. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding. I saw tears. I saw one mother clutch her notebook so hard her knuckles turned white. And when I finished, there was silence. Then applause. It wasn't a standing ovation. It wasn't a viral moment. But it was real. and that mattered. After the event, a woman approached me, mid-40s, tired eyes, kind voice. "My son's dating a girl who controls everything he does," she said. "We keep losing him in pieces. But you made me believe he might come back." I squeezed her hand. "He might. Just don't let go of the rope." That evening, I told Hannah about it. "I think you're the brave one," she said. I shook my head. "You faced him. You risked everything. I just stood on the shore and called your name." "But you never stopped calling," she replied. "That saved me more than you know." In the summer, Hannah officially launched The Second Door as a full program. She had an office space now, a small team, a partnership with a women's halfway home. She even started mentoring a girl named Michaela, a 19-year-old, with a hauntingly familiar story. "She reminds me of me," Hannah told me one night. "But I see her trying sooner, and that gives me hope." Hope. That word kept coming back. It was no longer a lifeline we clung to. It was something we handed to others. Then came the invitation that brought everything full circle. A national women's conference was being held in New York. They wanted Hannah to close the event with a speech titled, "Coming Home to Yourself." She asked if I would attend. "I can't do this one without you," she said. So Greg and I flew out, sat in the second row, watched our daughter, no longer scared, no longer small, stand on a stage before hundreds. She began like this. "I used to think home was a place you ran to. Then I thought it was a place you ran from. But I've learned that home is something you build within yourself. And sometimes the door to that home is heavy, rusted shut, hidden. But when someone, just one person, keeps knocking, keeps waiting, keeps saying, 'Come back when you're ready,' that's how you find the second door." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, and we got to witness it. That night, as we walked back to the hotel, I asked her, "Do you miss her? Who the version of you that believed he was love?" She thought for a moment. "I mourn her," she said. "She was desperate, lonely, brave in the wrong ways, but I don't miss her." Then she looked at me. "I'm finally who I was always meant to be, and I wouldn't have found her if you hadn't waited." 2 months after the conference in New York, a letter arrived in the mail. An actual letter, handwritten, no return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Even after everything, I would never forget the angular scrawl of Dean Kessler. My hands trembled as I turned the envelope over. It was addressed to Margaret Ellison, not to Hannah, not even to Mrs. Ellison. Just my name, direct and pointed, as if he had something final to say. I sat at the kitchen table for nearly half an hour before opening it. The sunlight crawled across the table as the day passed, and still I stared. Eventually, I tore it open. Margaret, I heard about her. The conference, the project, all of it. You must be proud, but also tired, I imagine. It takes a lot of energy to hold on to someone that tightly. I wanted to let you know I'm not angry anymore. I understand now that she wasn't meant for me, that she was looking for something I couldn't give her. Or maybe just something I took too easily. I'm not writing to make amends. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you that I don't hate you anymore. You won. Dean." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer, not out of fear, not out of secrecy, but because it no longer mattered. Dean had become a footnote. A scar, yes, but not a story. Not anymore. I didn't tell Hannah, not because I was hiding it, but because I knew something had shifted. The power he once held over her was gone, and even his words, once so dangerous, felt pitiful now. As if he too finally realized she had grown into someone far beyond his reach. That week, Hannah called with a new tone in her voice, one I hadn't heard before. "Mom," she said almost shyly, "there's someone I want you to meet." My heart jumped, an old reaction, one I thought I had buried. For a moment, I flashed back to that first time she said she was seeing someone, Dean's name heavy in the air, thick with danger. But then she said, "His name's Jonah. He volunteers at the center. He's studying law, wants to work in victim advocacy. And he's different. Different," how I asked gently. "He listens," she said. "He never tries to fix me. He just holds space." I felt tears rise in my throat. "Do you like him?" "I do. But more importantly, I like myself when I'm around him." She brought Jonah home for dinner the following month. He was soft-spoken, polite, with kind eyes and the sort of humility you can't fake. He didn't flinch when Greg questioned him about his intentions. He helped set the table without being asked. He even offered to water my garden. But the most telling moment came when he and Hannah stepped onto the porch after dinner. I stayed inside watching from the kitchen window, not to spy, just to observe. She leaned into his shoulder, not to hide, but simply to rest. It was the first time I'd seen her at peace next to a man. And Jonah. He didn't pull her closer. He didn't make any grand gestures. He just let her be. That's how I knew. He wasn't trying to save her. He was honoring her survival. Later that night, she sat beside me on the couch while Greg watched a game in the other room. "You like him, don't you?" she asked. "I do." She looked down at her hands. "I thought I might never trust myself again to choose the right people." "You don't have to get it right every time," I said. "You just have to choose with your eyes open." She nodded. "That's the difference." With Dean, I closed them tight and ran in blind. With Jonah, I'm seeing. Her work with the second door had blossomed. She'd hired 3 new counselors, launched a podcast series, and now she was partnering with shelters across the state to provide mobile trauma response teams. "I want to go into the places no one else does," she told me one day. "The trailer parks, the backwoods towns, the places where silence is generational." "You're going to burn out if you don't rest," I warned her. I know she smiled, but I finally feel like I'm using everything I went through for something good. She wasn't trying to outrun her past anymore. She was building from it. One evening in late September, she came home again, this time alone. No Jonah, no meetings. We sat on the porch swing, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea under the yellow glow of our porch light. "I've been thinking about writing a book," she said suddenly. "A book?" "Yeah. Not a memoir exactly. More like a story inspired by it. A girl who loses herself, then finds something better than what she thought she wanted." I smiled. "Sounds familiar." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Would you read it? I'd memorize it." We laughed. And then quietly she added, "Do you ever wish none of it had happened?" I thought for a long moment. "Parts of me do," I admitted. "I wish you'd never been hurt. I wish you never met him. I wish I never saw you cry like that." She nodded slowly. But I continued. "I also know that pain shaped you into someone extraordinary. You found your own way, not because of him, but in spite of him. And that's powerful." She was quiet. Then she said, "I think I needed to hear that." That night, I watched her fall asleep on the couch with her journal resting on her chest. I picked it up gently, as I had done so many times over the years. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. I just looked at the cover, cracked and worn from being opened so many times. It reminded me of her. Not broken, just lived in, tested, and still here. In the morning, she left for DC again, this time with an open heart and a map of possibilities in her mind. And me, I stood in the doorway a little longer than usual after she drove away. Not because I was worried, but because for the first time I realized I wasn't afraid of what came next. The worst had come, and so had the best. Now we were somewhere in the middle, and that too was beautiful. It was a rainy afternoon when I opened the mailbox and found another envelope. But this one, unlike Dean's, was light, almost celebratory. It had a floral stamp in the corner and was sealed with gold foil. Inside was a formal card, thick and cream-colored, embossed in soft ink. "You are cordially invited to the Second Door's first annual gala. Honoring Survivors, Celebrating Transformation, featuring keynote speaker Hannah Ellison. At the bottom, handwritten in her familiar script, "Please come. I need you in the room." I sat down on the porch swing, the rain misting the garden in front of me, and just stared at the invitation. It hit me then, not the pride, not the joy, but the sheer gravity of it all. There had been a time not too long ago when I'd been afraid I might outlive my daughter, that she'd vanish one night and never return, or worse, be buried under someone else's mistake, labeled only by the choices he made for her. Now she was being honored in front of hundreds. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was leading. The gala was scheduled for late November in D.C., a formal black tie event at an old historic library turned event space. Greg was hesitant about going at first. He didn't like crowds. He didn't wear suits. He didn't like being reminded of the past in rooms filled with strangers. But when I showed him the card and the note from Hannah, he stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "I suppose I can dig out the old jacket." That was Greg's way of saying I'm proud of her. When we arrived in D.C., I barely recognized the woman who greeted us. Hannah stood near the entrance in a sleek navy dress, her hair pulled back, wearing heels I knew she'd once sworn off. She looked poised, elegant, but most of all, she looked comfortable. Not just in the room, in her own skin. "Mom," she said, wrapping me in a warm hug. "Dad." Greg nodded, hugging her with a little awkwardness, the kind he always carried at emotional moments. "You look amazing," I said. She smiled. "I feel good. Nervous, but good. You've earned this." "I'm still earning it," she said. "But tonight is a reminder that I'm allowed to celebrate the steps, not just the finish line." The event hall was stunning. Dim lighting, string quartet, tables with glowing candles and name cards written in calligraphy. We were seated at table 3 near the stage, close enough to see her clearly when the time came. Jonah was there too, of course. Looking proud but quiet, his hand always either lightly on Hannah's back or resting near hers. He was attentive without being possessive, confident without being overbearing, a steady contrast to the hurricane that had once threatened to swallow her whole. Hannah introduced us to her team, Elise, now more like family than mentor, a young counselor named Danny, and Michaela, the girl she had started mentoring. Michaela hugged me. "Your daughter changed my life," she whispered. I smiled, blinking back tears. She changed mine too. After dinner and soft speeches from community partners, the MC stepped up to the podium. "And now," he said, "I have the distinct honor of introducing our keynote speaker, a woman who once walked through fire and returned with buckets of water for everyone still burning. Please welcome Hannah Ellison." Applause broke out across the room. I held my breath. She stepped up to the podium. No notes, just her. "Thank you." She began, her voice steady but warm. "People often ask me what it was like to survive an abusive relationship, but they rarely ask what it's like after. After the bruises fade, after the court dates are done, after the world expects you to be okay. Let me tell you what comes after. Guilt, shame, silence. And then, if you're lucky, someone who refuses to stop knocking on the door you've locked from the inside. For me, that person was my mother. She didn't always know what to say. Sometimes she said the wrong things. But she never gave up on me. Not when I screamed. Not when I ran. Not when I chose the person who hurt me over the people who loved me. And because of her, I made it back. Tonight isn't about me. It's about the people who reach back into the darkness, not to pull someone out, but to stand with them while they remember how to crawl. Thank you for believing survivors, for funding second chances, for opening doors even when they slam shut again. I'm not here because I was strong. I'm here because someone stood beside me while I remembered I could be. The room was silent. Then the applause came, not explosive but reverent. Like people didn't want to shatter the moment, only hold it. I clapped until my hands hurt. Greg stood up beside me and I saw the wet shine in his eyes he would never admit to. When she returned to our table, I didn't say anything. I just took her hand and held it, and she squeezed back 3 times. Our old code. I'm still here. The next morning, we sat in her apartment sipping coffee her awards, and thank you notes cluttering the kitchen table. I asked her, "What's next?" She smiled. "We're opening our first housing shelter next year, a place for women who don't just need counseling but safety." I exhaled. "You really aren't slowing down." She laughed. "For the first time, I don't want to." She turned toward the window, watching the morning light spill across the city skyline. "I used to think my story was something I had to hide, but now I know it's the key to someone else's escape route." Then she looked at me. "I used to want to forget it all, but now, I'm glad it happened." I stiffened slightly. That was hard to hear even now. She noticed. "I don't mean I'm glad for the pain," she clarified. "I mean I'm grateful for what I built from it." I nodded slowly. "That's a powerful place to live from." She smiled. "It is." And in that moment, I saw her not as my daughter, not as the girl I once feared I'd lost, but as the woman she had become, unapologetic, whole, unshakable, and herself. Time is strange. Some days pass like molasses, each hour dragging behind the last. Others disappear in the blink of an eye. But healing moves on its own schedule. It doesn't care about the calendar. It doesn't follow stages like the books say. It's a wave that rises and crashes and rises again, sometimes soft, sometimes violent, always unpredictable. And somewhere in that unpredictable tide, my daughter and I found our way back to each other. Not by erasing the past, but by choosing again and again to face it with open hands and open hearts. A year after Hannah launched the second door, I attended their staff retreat. She had insisted, "Mom, it's not just for employees. It's for people who helped make this possible." It was held at a quiet retreat center in the woods, minimal cell service, tall pines cabins with creaky floors, and the smell of cedar and coffee in the air. On the second day, they held something called the Circle, a restorative practice where every participant shared one thing they once thought they'd never survive, and the person who helped them through it. When it was Hannah's turn, she stood slowly brushing invisible lint from her sweater. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just spoke. "I once believed that love meant surrender, that losing yourself for someone else was the highest proof of loyalty. But then I found a better definition. Love is what remains when someone sees the ugliest parts of you and doesn't flinch. And for me, that someone was my mother." I didn't say anything when she sat down beside me. I just took her hand, and she leaned her head against my shoulder, not as a child, but as an equal. The retreat ended on a Sunday. On the drive back to the airport, Hannah and I shared a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only happens when two people know each other deeply, when nothing needs to be said to be understood. Then she turned to me and said, "Do you remember what you said the night you found me in the motel room?" I blinked. "Which part?" you said. "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest." I nodded. "I remember." "Well," she said, "I think I finally am." I smiled. "You are." These days, Hannah calls me less, but not because something's wrong. Quite the opposite. Her days are full now. She speaks at schools, trains, trauma responders, and consults with national organizations. Her name has appeared in articles, interviews, even a small documentary about rebuilding identity after abuse. But no matter how far her work takes her, she still sends me photos of her garden. Yes, she has one now. Small. A few herbs. Some tomatoes. Lavender growing in pots. It's not about the plants, she says. It's about remembering to nurture, to tend to something, to root herself in the present. She tells me it's the first thing I've ever grown just for me. One afternoon, she sent me a voice message. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to say something. You know, I used to think you were too soft, that your love had no edges, that you were too forgiving. But now I understand that was your power. You didn't stop loving me even when I made it hard. And that love, it saved me." I played that message 3 times. Then I saved it in 3 different folders, because I knew it was something I'd want to hear for the rest of my life. Greg has changed too. He still doesn't talk about it often. He's not built for long emotional conversations, but he joins me in watching Hannah's interviews. He mails her newspaper clippings about grants and legal reforms. He even started attending a support group for parents of children affected by trauma. At first, he didn't say much there either. But one night he came home and told me, a man in the group said his daughter won't speak to him. I told him to keep showing up anyway, because if she ever turns around, she'll need to see someone still standing there. I nodded, eyes misty. She had that, he added, because of you. As for me, I still have the binder. The one filled with letters, court documents, old photos, and scribbled notes from the darkest days. I don't open it often, but I keep it on the shelf where I can see it. Not as a wound, but as a record. Proof that even when the map was shredded, we found our way home. I also kept Dean's last letter. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me of how far we'd come. When I look at it now, it doesn't make my heart race. It makes me feel resolved. That chapter ended. The rest, we're still writing it. Sometimes I wonder what I would tell the version of myself from back then, the woman sitting in her daughter's empty room clutching a box of hidden letters and wondering where she went wrong. I think I'd say this: you didn't fail. You were handed a heartbreak you never asked for, and you carried it anyway. You stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. You loved her back to life. And someday, you'll look into her eyes and see not just your daughter, but a survivor, a leader, a woman you admire. And I do, every single day. So if you're watching this and wondering if someone you love is too far gone, let me tell you, they aren't. They may run, they may lash out, they may walk through hell and drag your heart behind them. But if you stand in love, not control, not shame, but love, you give them something solid to return to. And that return, it's the miracle. My name is Margaret Ellison. My daughter once walked away from everything that loved her to follow someone who used her. But now she's the one holding the door open for others. She's the one turning her wounds into keys. She's the one I waited for, and she was worth every second. So, if you've made it this far into our story, thank you. And if you've ever had to fight for someone who didn't know how to fight for themselves, I see you. You're not alone. Share your story in the comments below, or just let us know you're still standing. We are too, and we always will be. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to Grace's Truth, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. We post new stories every week, stories of resilience, of justice, of second chances. You never know who might need to hear yours next.